Good afternoon. Stephen Flanagan, 191 Normer Avenue, West Islip. Just here to comment on a couple of things, specifically item 7, discussing budgetary issues. You know, we've had a problem with transparency in our budget process in the past, as we discussed in our last meeting. By the way, Mr. Nolan, you were the supervisor for the budget in 2008 and in 2009, just by blaming it on the previous administration. Honestly, I'm surprised you didn't blame George Bush on that one.
What do you
last hearing,
your typical nonsense. Go ahead.
Yeah, typical nonsense is my second time here.
Public portion, make your comment. Make your 5 minutes.
That's my comment.
Thank you very much.
That's my comment you made.
Well,
inaccurate statements in your last meeting. Okay,
right,
sir?
Right.
Okay, since you don't answer questions specifically, I guess
this
I had to answer for you.
This is the public portion.
That's correct. I'm a member of the public. I'm a member of the public. Yes, sir. Thank you. Okay, I'll make my comments. As far as transparency, we did have some hearings to try and open up the process for public input on the budget, and that was rejected. Apparently, you voted against it, and 2 other board members voted against it. We happen to think that, considering what's been going on the last couple of years, that we should have more transparency, more public input, and more input from the people in this room and from the department heads. Now, remember, this board has asked that be done, and they understand that's going to be on, I think, number 7 here, to at least open up and have some specific discussion on this budget before the public and with public input. Now, I come to these meetings, and I hear that there's public hearings on this, public hearings on that, but there's no public hearings on the budget, a presentation. We don't think that's appropriate. We don't think that's appropriate. We think it's an honest and simple request that the budget process be open, that it's important that we increase transparency, again, especially in view of the problems that we've had in the past. That's specifically my statement. We're here in support of item number 7. I think it's Mr. Flattron made that resolution, and we would like to see you pass that resolution this afternoon. Thank you.
Elizabeth Lavaris.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Lavaris. I live at 299 Seminole Street in Ronkonkoma. I'm here about item 7 and 8 also. And I'd like to express my opinion that as a taxpayer, we should have visibility into the town budget process. It should not be secretive. It's our money being spent, and we should have a right to know exactly where the money is going. Secondly, I would like to express my concern that the committee is going to come up with guidelines on government access channel, and that should be available to opposing views. I'm a little concerned that it won't be available to opposing views, and I don't think this is right. I'm a retired disabled veteran who served my country, and the least that I should expect from my government is transparency. Thank you.
Thank you. Ivan Young.
Good afternoon.
Not working.
Name and address for the record.
191 Norman Avenue, co-founder and service site correction. I'll be brief. First thing, I brought Conrad Shabauer.
You get the mic on?
Avenue. In West Islip. I'm in support of resolution number 7 to try to get open hearings and make the budget process more open. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I've been made aware through recently an article about this access channel, and there's some controversy and some debate on how it should be used and whether I'm supposed to be partisan or not partisan. I'll make one thing clear. I'm very partisan. I'm extremely partisan. I wouldn't start this conversation if I wasn't partisan. And I do believe that being partisan is part of our republic. We don't run by fiat. That the adversarial government, which checks and balances, is why we're here. That's my first thing. And as far as First Amendment rights and censorship, I'm not a lawyer, so I couldn't really argue on that. And I'm not really a First Amendment guy. I'm more of a Second Amendment guy. A Marine rifleman back then. But I find it very offensive. Well, it's just personal. Nothing not an insult to members of the other party. But when I hear this stuff about being partisan, and that's what's ruining the country, and that type of talk is very condescending, and I don't appreciate it. And I've been coming to a few of these board members, these hearings, and I was here when Mr. Floweron was the only Republican member on the board. And I know that this board has pretty much a 5-0 board, and everything went along very smoothly. And now there's some adversarial concept to the board. And sometimes I see, well, let me just put it this way. Mr. Flower and Ms. Bergen, I consider them my representatives. I'm a Republican, I'm a conservative. They represent me. And when they're treated in what I consider an unprofessional, rude, or disconcerting fashion, you're treating me that way. And I don't know if maybe it's not to do with personality, but I don't like it. And that type of conduct is unacceptable. Anyway, that's all. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lisa Keller.
Censorship on the Govt channel, Trish Bergen. I also want to say, Mr. Nolan, you have given me such a hard time. You've never returned any of my phone calls. I've asked for something to be done in Fair Harbor. I called Trish Bergen, she got it done in 2 months. So I just want to say, I hope this is your last board meeting, because
I spoke to you several times, and I was involved in the successful compilation of it after we went through process.
You
So,
are. But
Ms. Tannen, you have your opinion, do what you want. It's your 5 minutes.
well,
Shoot.
I'm done with it, but I just,
Okay,
you know,
thank you.
I wish you luck in your new job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That is funny. Felicia, that's certainly, you're certainly entitled to it. Felicia, when,
I was hoping that you're following through with the amount this is costing, and all these 5 years. It must have, at this point, have come to the amount of money that this would have cost. And we're not talking about, you don't want to do the $1.5 million, $2 million fix on our block, but something in the meantime, besides this, a plug, something
that's what
that
we're doing.
We
that's
only
not,
put the duck bill
if you
in
look at the front of my
last
house,
week.
it doesn't even
No,
go
it's
down
been
the
in-
drain.
it's been in and
Because
out
the
of it.
street is so bad, it does not even go down the drain, so the plugs are not even helping. It's just stagnant water in front of the house.
You know,
So I'm just hoping that you're looking at this in one big picture.
I've been there numerous times, and the duck bill thing has been replaced 10 times because they break, as I explained. And those are the facts. And I'm not, you know, when you say I mention my street, I only mention my street to indicate that this is a problem. I'm explaining the broad strokes of what we do here, what we're dealing with, budgetary versus task. And lowest taxes on Long Island, that's the facts, okay? But what comes with that is I have that much money to repair streets, to do duck bills, to put people out there pumping your street. It's a budget. We have a budget, and we're expending the money as intelligently as we possibly can. And frankly, there's been more done on those 3 streets in the last 4 years than was done for 40 years before that, on my watch. On my
What
watch.
exactly, can you tell us what has been done
On
Seacombs
Seacombs Lane
West?
Center, Central, West, and East.
We live on
Yeah,
Seacombs
okay,
West.
but that problem has been addressed, as you know, as entirely. And we're trying to deal with it in an intelligent manner to maximize the bang for the buck.
Well,
Hopefully.
can I interrupt for just 1 second? Felicia, part of the problem that I've learned since coming on the board is that in order to get the reimbursement from FEMA, we have to demonstrate our expenditures. And so I have contacted the Commissioner of the Department of Public Works to ask him, when we applied for that FEMA money last year or the year before that, to try to get reimbursed for our expenses that we laid out for the pumping and all the trucks and that. They have still not been able to, this was weeks ago, still not been able to provide me, my office, with the receipts of our expenditures. So when we applied for that FEMA money, we never got the reimbursement because I don't think the Department of Public Works provided them with the proper paperwork to demonstrate our expenditures. And so that in lies the grub. And that is the part that now I'm trying to pick it up from there and start figuring out what the expenses were. But I've asked the Commissioner of the Department of Public Works numerous times over several weeks, and he still will not provide me with the documentation. So that is where somebody dropped the ball for your community, and that's not right.
I thank you for looking into that.
Well, that's a characterization. That's okay.
Who's the boss of the commissioner?
Rich Baker is the
Rich Baker is the commissioner.
Commissioner of the Department of Public Works.
And who's his boss? If
Town
he's
board.
done?
Town board.
Okay. So
Well,
that's who.
I've called for
should be
his
responsible.
resignation in the past, and I have not gotten enough votes for it, so,
What was that?
I've called for his resignation in the past, and I didn't get enough votes to.
Well, we know what you think of the commissioner. I happen to think the commissioner's done a tremendous job with the resources he has. It's very clear that there's a cheering squad in the room, and that's all well and good.
No, there's no
Facts
cheering.
are the facts. The facts are the facts. More paving this year than any year in history with the same money. More drainage work than any year in history.
No, that's great. That
with the
sounds
same money.
like, that's like steps in the right
that-
direction. I'm glad to hear that.
Thank you, but that's really,
That means you're doing your job. I applaud that.
okay?
I do. I know
Thank
it's
you.
a struggle. I'm not gonna get into he said, she said,
Here's something,
this, that.
I
But
mean,
listen,
your street spend
But listen,
is in
listen.
need of improvement, I get it, and we're
no,
fully.
it's true, but right there, if the commissioner is not answering the bell where he's supposed to be, I expect his boss, I was in the military, so I know how this works, I expect his boss to go to him and say, excuse me, sir, can you provide this information for the town, the people that elected you?
There's been an ongoing.
So where are we at with that
debate between
process?
The councilwoman and the commissioner, and these types of statements are made routinely at these meetings. Oftentimes, they're not accurate, and sometimes there's something to them,
Sure.
and we sort it out after the meeting. But it's not my opinion that that's accurate. Simple as that.
It's totally accurate.
Well, that's always your opinion.
It's just that you don't want to face the facts, that's the truth.
Well, I don't want to face the Trish dogma.
At the end of the day, Felicia, we are going to continue to stay on this. We are all going to work together to try to get your street resolved as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Trish.
Thank you.
Thank you for hearing us.
Barbara Schaefer.
Good afternoon. Unfortunately, more of the same. I live at 117 Sequams Lane West, West Islip. I've lived there for 11 years.
We need your phone name.
Barbara F. Schaefer. For the last 3 years, Bill Kern's been leading the charge. He's a fabulous guy and really helping us all. It's extremely frustrating. The money was funded for the project for both streets. It was all spent on Center. I'd like to note that Sequams West has 2% of severe loss properties in New York State. Sequams Center has none. Right there, it's just the truth.
Well,
In the meantime, can I finish 1 second, please? Thank you.
Certainly.
In the meantime, what we have on our street now are flapper valves. They're not duck bills. The duck
Okay.
bill was installed
It's another
last
name
week.
for them.
No, they're two different things, sir.
They're two different things.
They're two different things.
There was one duck bill put on last week.
Yes, I know, and that's a test. Perhaps we're not going to get the big funding. In the meantime, we're drowning. 9 times out of 10, the flooding is from the sewers, not over the dock. And frankly, it's very, very frustrating. We pay a lot of money, and I don't think we're asking for anything we're not entitled to. And it's a little more than frustrating to hear about everything else that's getting paved, especially when I see Magoon Landing being paved, Wagstaff being paved. These streets were in nowhere near as bad a condition as our street.
Can I ask you a question here? I'm sorry, I'm listening a lot. I know it's Sequams Lane, I know there's been problems and everything. I've been in like 4 years here. How long has it been in this bad of shape?
Since I moved in 11 years ago,
Okay, 11
13
years ago.
years ago.
Okay,
13.
well,
It
in other
hasn't
words,
been
we're
paved since the
trying to
sewers
fix
went
it.
in.
We've got places, we've done one section of it. All right, we've
Right,
had
the
help
money
from
was
the...
spent on Center.
Right, we had help from the state, but we are trying. 11 years before, whatever, nothing was done. So we're trying to get something done. It's just like when I got here, there was typewriters on the desks. We're moving forward.
I understand that, but in
We're
the
moving
meantime, we
forward,
have
but
manual valves
the
available.
other people on the other lane would say, you know what, if we did your road, they'd say, well, what about us? You have to start somewhere.
We have proven record of severe lost properties.
Absolutely, and
All
so
right,
have they.
Councilman, let's let.
Additionally-
finish your public portion.
Additionally, there are manual valves available. We would be willing to do it ourselves. 2 years we're waiting. We've been having meetings, meeting promises after promise, nothing. It's frustrating.
Yes, it is.
I'd like to see something done, and I'm never, ever, ever gonna let go on this, and that's what I have to say. And for the first time in my life, I'm voting Republican.
Thank you. Which is contrary to the idea that we're not doing anything. Yes. Yes, that's, he certainly does. Joe Cangelari.
Joe Cangelari, 271 Haven Avenue, Ronkonkoma, New York. Supervisor Nolan, councilpersons, I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you. I have three issues. The first is a question. Recently, I received a mailer referring to a dark sky initiative as far as streetlights are concerned. Could someone explain what that is?
Yeah, Dark Skies Initiative is an attempt to ask people over the next 10 years, as you're changing out your light bulb or as you're to go to more energy efficient light bulb and try to shine the light downward as opposed to onto other people's properties.
Okay, the mailing came from Supervisor Nolan, and it referred to the street lights, and it was in the same, it was in a...
It wouldn't have anything about dark skies in it.
Okay.
Unless it's consistent with dark sky, I don't think that's what it's about.
Well, because I've lived in the same location for 35 years, and a number of months ago they replaced all the street lights with the new and latest and greatest, and there are major issues with them, okay? The light itself is much darker, and the lens itself does not project out in a wide area. Okay, and this is referred to as the Dark Sky Initiative in a piece of mailing that I received. Now, the problem with this...
Sir, I just want to interrupt. They're actually two different things. The Dark Skies Initiative is something that I did when I first got here. The street lighting program, however, is Councilman Edwards' project. So
Okay.
And they're two different things.
Well, this came from a piece of campaign literature from Supervisor Nolan, so that's the only reason I'm referring to it. Okay, anyway, bottom line is, here is the problem. Okay, not only is it not as bright as the previous lights, but the light pattern is now very focused in a smaller diameter area. So what you have is you have a dull spotlight of light right underneath the street lights, and then you have darkness until you hit the next street light on the pole. There has already been 2 accidents in my neighborhood where someone coming over a hill doing the speed limit at night and did not see a dark-colored car parked and had a minor accident. 2 separate individuals had that situation. If you walk the neighborhood when it's dark, you go from a dimly lit area to almost complete darkness. Okay, this is not an improvement. Maybe I can understand the reason in order to save energy costs, but I tend to think it's at the expense of public safety, and I hope it would be looked at, because this is a serious, serious issue. The other thing I would like to comment on is I think it's a good idea to have the public in on the preliminary budget proposals, okay? School districts sort of follow a similar model, and it works, you know. It's not like you got to listen to everything that the public brings up, but it keeps us involved. And maybe once in a while you might actually get some positive input. If you bring the department heads in on the preliminary negotiations, it sort of makes them accountable also, not only to you guys, but to us, the voters. So I hope that you would all give serious consideration to that. The public access issue, I'm going to be honest with you. I voted for the last election, okay? I'm a registered independent. My wife is a registered Democrat. We both voted for you. And I've chosen to pay attention quite a bit over the last year or so, okay? And I actually saw the interview that Councilman Bergen had done with Croce, and I didn't sense that there was anything derogative said about Supervisor Nolan. He was just basically expelling his virtues. And the interesting thing, when I had heard that this had become such a major issue for you, my first thought was, you missed a golden opportunity. Because you could have been on there yourself, expounding your virtues and what you accomplished for the town. Instead, in my opinion, you chose the moral low ground. And one other little comment. I don't know you, you don't know me, but I'm kind of observing what's been going on here. I find your response to the Commissioner of the Department of Public Works not providing information to an elected official in order to expedite getting federal money in, I just find it absolutely stunning that you were not able to put politics aside and require this to happen, because you, her, every one of you on this board, including the Department of Public Works Commissioner, works for us, and I think you've lost sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Deborah Kavanagh, 21 Walnut Street, Central Islip, New York. I'd first like to say we are in support of the hotels going into Central Islip, so I support the change of zone for Resolution 28. Second, Resolution 7. I do believe that budget hearings should be more transparent. I think people should have input on what goes into the town budget. Then maybe we could get some of our streets paved by everybody realizing when you did the pavement study, what it would cost for an increase to get the roads paved and to fix the problem. So I am all for the transparency in the budget hearing.
The pavement study was done before I got here.
The one that you had...
Cash and spend, you know,
the one that you talked about, the $70 million bond issue that you were talking about.
That didn't cost anything, and there was no bond issue, and it was an infrastructure committee that studied the infrastructure. It was a citizens group, and it didn't cost us anything.
No, I understand. That I understood, but I also know they recommended that we float a $70 million bond this September in order to get the roads paved. That was their recommendation. I didn't say the board accepted.
That's absolutely correct.
Okay. Second, I am in agreement with Cablevision and keeping Tricia's show on the air. I think that's our First Amendment right to hear both sides, so I'm all for what Cablevision did do. Next, you came to Central Islip, to the library chat, and you spoke to the residents of Central Islip and the community that you were moving public safety into our senior center, which we're aware of, but you also said that you were moving our seniors 80 feet next door. It's been to my knowledge and to the knowledge of the seniors that they're now being sent to West Islip. I've spoken to, that's not what I've heard. I've even heard from some of the people on your reform team. And I've spoken to many of my seniors who have heard that same statement. My seniors are upset. They're angry. They feel like they're being slapped in the face. They feel that they live in Central Islip. They have a right to have their meetings in Central Islip like every other community has a right to keep their meetings in their town. They also feel that they're entitled to the same services that the other community gets that we don't get. They say all that our seniors claim that all they get is lunch, twice a month, I guess, when I meet, and they get to play cards, sit, and have conversation. They don't feel that they get the same services that the other towns get. And last, I want to know, where does District Attorney Spoda stand on your accepting campaign contributions with Intercounty Bakery? On his investigation, do you have an update?
Are you heading up the investigation?
No, I know I sent him.
There isn't any.
Thank you.
There isn't any. Thank you. Resolution number 6, approval of the town board for the tentative budget to become the preliminary budget. Motion. I'll make the motion. Do I have a second? All those in favor? Discussion.
I have some questions to ask the town controller, Joe Lumpy. second, I'm sorry, it's a lot of people's budget.
No problem.
First, some questions I have regarding revenues. Since the economy has had a major turn down since 2006, mortgage taxes have decreased and construction applications have decreased. I look at the revenue column and I see that we're expecting to get a lot more in revenue today compared to 2006. It seems like over the last 6 years, we're projecting our estimates to be 130% more than they were back in 2006. And that was the height of the mortgage tax, and that balloon has gone down. And also our receivables have gone down about 20% over the last 6 years. So where it used to be, we expected the revenue to be this, and we actually did this. The lines have crossed. I think it was in 2008. We didn't really make the projections. And again, mortgage taxes keep on going down. Besides some other fees, some of the departments have gone up. But all in all, it's been more than a 30% increase over the last 6 years. And it just doesn't seem like, good budgeting, or we're going to have, or we're kicking the can down the road, and we're going to have a big problem next year.
Well, when it comes to the revenues, the departments do their best to go through and they look at historically what they expect to receive, if there are any fee increases or rate changes, things of that nature. My office, we do the same thing. If we have any lease agreements, we're going to budget that lease agreement because that's what they anticipated to be received. I would have to go in and take a look at specifically what numbers you're referring to, but to the best of our abilities, we budget conservatively on our revenues where we expect to receive at least, if not more, what we budget in actual revenues, not less.
Well, it seems like, again, these numbers I got from your department, been asking, what you had the last couple of years. And also, I know sometimes anybody looking at the budget gets a little confusing because, 6 years ago, under the general fund, the airport was added in. About 3 years later, we had the airport as a special district. And it gets a little confusing where that 13 million is. So you either have to add the airport in on all of them or take them out to do a fair comparison. And I did all different ways, cutting it to try to see. And again, back in 2006, when you had estimated revenue, general fund plus the airport, that's how it used to be presented, you had expected revenue about 47 million, and the town got it 76 million. Since that, if you add the airport in 2012, and the last couple of years, every year, we've inflated that 47 million, saying we're going to expect up to 56 million. So we've increased, as we've lost about 16,000 mortgage tax. It seems like the wrong direction to go. And it seems like from the numbers, so in 2009, we overestimated. We came in less than what the budget was. We came in less than the revenue. So again, we used to be very conservative planning, where worst case scenario, this is what we're going to get in. We just did better. We now have been over-exaggerating what we're going to get in. And again, it seems like it's just going to set up a failure. That's what I'm concerned about. What are we going to be faced with next year or the year after? We keep on doing this. Again, we had a shortfall, just in that department alone, the general fund, just in that alone in 2009, that is. So, again, it seems like we've increased by 30% of projections, and there's a lot of our streams have been going down.
Again, I don't have the 2009 budget in front of me, and obviously I would have to go line by line and find out where the actual results exceeded budget, where the actual results were less than budget. I can tell you, without having to look at it, that the interest rates, which dropped off in 2008 going into 2009, that's going to be one of those major variances where we budgeted more than what we actually got in. Unfortunately, that was not something we anticipated, that drop off. Again, so when you do the budget, the bit of a crystal ball, it's a bit of a guessing game, there's always a timing issue. So when we did the budget in September of 2008, where we were traditionally interest rates of 4% on our earnings, coming into 2009, those interest rates dropped to under 2%. So that's going to be a significant drop. Again, I'd have to go through all the department lines to find out exactly what other revenues did not match what the anticipated budget was. But I'm sorry, and I can get back to you with that answer once I have a chance to take a little more in-depth look at it.
Part of, I know even the next resolution I have is about having the process more open. It's just because each one of us board members voted independently. We all have different ideas or expertise, and I want to have discussion on this, because right now this is prepared, we never get to discuss publicly in between all of us or with all the commissioners. I did go to different departments, over time, but this to me is overestimating, we see, again, underestimate like any business. What's the worst case scenario? And it's changed since then. And again, in the last 6 years, we projected 30% more in revenue. And we'll be losing millions of dollars, just simply mortgage tax alone. So our numbers are down over 20%. So then, again, the lines are crossed. So this, I'm worried about, is going to blow up in the future. So again, I think this budget, we're over-exaggerating with it, bringing in revenues, is going to have a big problem.
Well, I will say again, as far as the 2012 budget is concerned, when we looked at the revenues, we looked at what we've taken in historically over the last 3 years. That's how my office does it. That's, I'm pretty sure, how most of the commissioners look at it as well. And I feel comfortable that the revenue number we have in there is going to be a fair representation of what we will receive, if not more. Again, the philosophy going into any budget cycle, as you pointed out, is you're conservative on your revenues and you're overly aggressive on your expenses, and you hope you get more in on the actual revenue and you don't spend as much as you budget. That's the thought process we have going into it. So I can stand here today and tell you that comfortably and conservatively, we did budget those revenues. We do talk to the commissioners. Again, it's not my office that comes up with the numbers. The individual commissioners come up with those numbers. My office reviews those requests and determines is it too high, too low, or right on target. And that's what all of September, basically all of August, is done with my office and the commissioners. So I'm comfortable with the revenue budget, the numbers that are in there.
Joe?
Yes.
Can I ask a couple questions? Can you do me a favor, please, and take a look at how Brookhaven lays out their budget online for their constituents, because it's much clearer and it's just easier to understand. And if we could take a look at possibly going to that type of a format, I think it'll be easier for our constituents to be able to understand the revenues and the expenses. If you just take a look at the way that they lay it out.
Sure, I mentioned that before. I made a note to take a look at that.
Okay. And then the other thing is, we're looking at a $206 million budget here. I'm looking at these numbers and I see an $8.5 million shortfall for our obligations to the pension fund. We're going to skip a payment to the pension fund in 2012, and as Steve said, sort of kick the can down the road, that $8.5 million. I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, the state retirement bill historically was due in December, and about 5 or 6 years ago, I believe, the state changed when the payment was due. It's now due in February of the following year. Traditionally, the town has always budgeted that to make the full payment in December. In light of the extremely escalating costs and increases within the state retirement bill, I had suggested to the supervisor's office of potentially pushing that into February. As you see, again, this is a 0% tax increase budget. To add an $8 million expense into 2012 would have been almost impossible to come up with a 0% tax increase. Again, right now, when we do these budgets, we do it as best as we can, as accurate as we can, in the best interest of all, and that includes the constituents.
But then where do we think that we're going to get this $8.5 million in 2013? Are we just hoping that the economy turns around?
We're going to hope the economy turns around. We'll hope that maybe there's a drop-off in other expenses that we may not have to cover, such as the fuel expense. We're doing right now with Councilman Edwards with the street lighting program. That's going to yield additional savings, and we're not going to have as high of an electric bill. So there are many things that are in the pipeline. Again, it's a crystal ball. We do the best that we can, and if we did not do that, there would have been an additional $8 million worth of expenses to this budget, and I don't know if we would have had the existing numbers to sustain that.
So we're going to push off the $8.5 million obligation, that payment, to 2013. Sorry, I know that we're facing a really tough time and a really tough economy, but to kick that can down the street and then hope that things turn around, I think is basically putting this burden on the next administration. Combine that with the $23 million that this budget takes out of the rainy day fund, leaves us with how much in the rainy day fund?
The rainy day fund, which is the unreserved, unappropriated fund balance. The rule in my office is that we try not to go below 10% of the next year's budget. So in the case of the general fund, where we have roughly an $86 million budget, we will do everything we can to make sure, and we would not appropriate fund balance that would bring our unreserved number down below $8.6 million. the projection for 2011 is to end up somewhere in the $10.5 million range.
If we go below, say, 9 million in that reserve, that's going to upset our bond rating as well. So just a combination of all of these things together, I think that in 2003 that we could be in serious trouble. I think that we're, Supervisor, I think your budget is putting us in a very, very precarious position for 2013.
Well, just if you speak about the $8 million, you know, several years ago when we were trying to sell a piece of property at the railroad, to the railroad, you expressed a lot of reservations about that. We did that. It happened. We garnered significant money from that. There are a lot of factors. There's a thing called rollover savings where you don't fill vacancies in the year. We've been doing that year after year after year. That's why we have vacancies, and that's why we did away with it in this budget. We're going to continue to do that trend. These are the kinds of things where you save millions and millions of dollars. And it's, you know, the goal here, my goal was to deliver a budget of 0%, which clearly is what helps our community, and that's what I've delivered. You know, if you want to put a resolution, you know, if you want to add $8 million and enact that tax increase, that's something I think you should do publicly. If that's what your position is.
No, that's not what I want to do, but there are other things that I want to do.
Well, that's you just raised an issue, and that's the choices. Those are the choices.
No, there are other choices. We have a $3.4 million on workers' comp because we're self-insured. We haven't taken a look at if we had explored other options like state insurance fund. We haven't looked into putting that out for bid since 2008. We've gone from 1,100 employees to 750 employees. Perhaps we need to look at that. Perhaps we need to look at the possibility of just getting a better number on that.
You know, workers' comp
since 2008.
Workers' compensation is an area that we've done a tremendous amount of focus. We received a national award because we saved $6.7 million in the last 3 years.
Half of your national award was my sick bank was also in that application for that award. So half of your award is actually half of my award.
Well, I think if you did the math, it would come out a little different than half, because that was an ongoing process, and the sick bank is an absolute drop in a large bucket.
Put that in the press release.
Yeah, $6.7 million national award, getting back to what's germane to what we're talking about. $6.7 million is in the workers' comp arena. So our numbers in workers' comp have been squeezed and are very accurate, as the controller explained. Revenues, we try to be one way, expenditures another, and you know how that works. And if you want to, if you want to pay the bill,
I don't want to pay that bill,
take a position publicly.
I think you need to go look line by line in this budget and take a look. No. Our Human Services Department, do you know that we take on so much of what the county is actually responsible for, and we do all that work? We have to at some point tell the county they have to take back some of their programs and they have to do them.
We are looking at...
And those are tough decisions, but that's what we got to do.
You bet.
Well, you didn't do it in this budget.
You certainly did. Hopefully down 300 people since I got here.
We're spending 20% more on a budget compared to 6 years ago.
We have the biggest Human Service Department
The budget is 20%
out of any
higher than
town.
6 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into this, but you've never been able to challenge the reality that we've gone down 300 people. And you always speak
Yeah, but the payroll
about,
hasn't changed.
It actually has. It's down,
Finally, after 4 years, it went down a little bit less.
no, it's down millions of dollars. And the reality is that the reason that it is not a percentage increase down 30% is because there are contractual agreements that everyone on this board voted for, pay increases and step increases that are institutionalized that are beyond our control past that.
People step in and step out.
So if you have a person, no. If you have an employee who's been here for the last 20 years, their amount of recompense increases. And that diminishes how much you save vis-a-vis 300 less bodies. You need to look at the math, and that's the truth.
The math is we're down 30% of the workers, and our budget is 20% bigger. It's not more with less, so it's less with more. And every year we blocked having a public process to get other ideas such as what about looking at the county program. Let's discuss these things. It's not one person makes the budget. We don't get to discuss or anything. We just vote on it. And again, we're all responsible. We all have 5 different talents we come from, and let's get the best budget.
Well, we'll get to resolution 8 in a second, we'll discuss that
Okay.
at 7 rather, but
Going
your
forward.
budget, this reality is that we passed a resolution, and we had a meeting in September about our budget, and we sat here with the department heads, and there was a give and take back and forth that you were part of.
With no handouts during or prior to the meeting to the board or the public. It was a PowerPoint 100 feet across the room, and it was like analyzing Obamacare, all these thousands of numbers. You know, you have an hour to ask questions.
Yeah, and then that's in September, the first week in
And I got
September.
this 8 hours
then-
before, and I
and
was
then-
trying to get a couple of questions, and you closed down the meeting, because we don't want to have any discussion.
What's that?
You didn't want to have any discussion, you closed down the meeting.
You weren't heard from on the budget between that meeting in September and last Friday when you called up the controller. That's the truth. And then you beam in, because there's a meeting on Tuesday, you got to prep for this routine. But you have plenty of opportunity to look at the budget. You have the whole year to look at the budget as it's going along to make any suggestions, anything in writing that you would like. Where are the suggestions?
To answer that one comment, part of the reason I want to have a public hearing is because the numbers I get, or what I verbally get, sometimes is not what the public and the press gets. And I'll read from an email from Mr. Ludwig. I asked a question on June 14th of 2010, and I was asking questions about custodial, because we're doing more with outsourcing. I just wanted to take an analysis, see, is it more or less, is it better? And I got certain numbers, and I believe they're kind of factual. And it was 2006, he had 2 companies, American Eagle Maintenance and Eagle Maintenance, were outside companies who did a little bit over $100,000 we spent for outside contractors. 2007, about $86,000, 280, $159,000. Then when I came to the final budget hearing, which is too late to make any changes, and basically like you myself, as I feel like on my own island, was a budget process to just approve the budget. It was a PowerPoint presentation that your department, your office prepared, and the PowerPoint on the wall for 2006 for outside contractors, 0. 2007, outside contractors, 0. 2008, $58,000, $100,000 different. So again, yes, I am getting different numbers than the public and the press gets. So that's why I want to have this process, and that's why, yes, I didn't run to every office, because I'm getting, sometimes I'm not getting the clear answer. I believe Joe probably gave me the right answers on this email, but there was other things presented publicly, and it's awful hard to fight, to bring this to light. DiNapoli's office tried to bring some of these things to light, and again, we went up to Albany to help on a cover-up, and that we didn't have to be able to, with deliberate misrepresentation of the budget, and that's what's continuously happening. So I have some other questions.
The front page of the draft audit, the front page of the draft audit, if you read it, states that if you have thoughts, comments, input, you go and you make them. You made none. I made my input, and everything that I did was contextual.
No school districts have...
See, this is the bottom line here. You know, we go through this constantly, and after last year's shenanigans with this, I asked for the number of dollars spent on town custodial expenses between 6 and 10. It's down 17%. Check the numbers. These numbers don't lie. You know, it's always, I don't get the right...
Joe, the blue book that you give to all the council people,
Yes.
is difficult to figure out, to go through the lines. And the PowerPoint presentation was very much like that book, and that's why I think we need to change the way that we lay out the numbers, not just for the members of the council, but for the members of the public.
Why do we ask these questions, without the meeting?
We did. I've discussed this.
It's more fun this one. Okay, so moving right along. We have a motion and a second on the floor on resolution number 6.
I think.
All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, I should wait for Councilman Clark.
I have some other questions still to control.
Okay.
Thank you. In the capital budget, just some questions. In the past, we mostly use a round number. We usually had like 15 million that we're projecting we're going to spend on capital. And that's separating. I see you have a separate line for resource recovery. You want to just explain why that's sort of separated in the budget first?
It's a little confusing, so I'll try to be as clear and concise as possible. When the resource recovery agency was corrected, and make sure if I get any of this wrong, I'm sure he'll come up and kick me and give the right answer. But when the facility was built, the Resource Recovery Agency had a debt ceiling, which basically means they weren't allowed to issue any more debt. So what the town did, it issued the debt on behalf of the Resource Recovery Agency, and through the administrative chargeback, the Resource Recovery Agency reimburses the town. So just for the purposes of full disclosure, we let everyone know that that's really a resource recovery project versus a town of Islip environmental project.
One thing also when looking through the capital, it seemed like a lot of the departments used to have like different capital improvements inside the department, like building a new building, like rec center had the future Central Islip rec center under that $2 million. Is that still stay under that area, or does it go somewhere else now?
A couple of years ago, when Commissioner Lapham was the Commissioner of DPW, I had conversations with him. Basically, since the department under DPW, they're in charge of all facilities. And I like to pick on human services just because they're fun people to pick on. They used to put in budget requests for facility improvements. And no offense to Betty Lorenz or Cal Charchalis, and I would not have a better answer, I have no idea what it costs to fix a building. DPW, that's their job. So in the conversation I had with Commissioner Lapham, I said, you know, does it make more sense, and are you comfortable with taking control over all facility improvements? And they said, yes, it actually made sense for them to do it since their guys are the ones who are in charge of all facilities to begin with. So now they're basically in charge of doing the triage of what facilities need improvements, and they use the annual bonded money to make those improvements.
Now, I know like when you look at past budgets, there'll be a certain section, you know, you have recreation, DPW, and you'll have the future, what you expected. When the following year has a zero, you know, and now it's this year coming, it's a zero you have, don't you still normally put the line in or something, so you can see the projections for the future? The reason I'm asking that as an example, Human Services had a line usually of, you know, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million or more. Now, some of that was building, but it was other things like vans and trucks and their projections in the future years up and down. But in this capital budget, there was no line for them. And to me, again, it just makes it a little suspect, like why all of a sudden the whole department disappears in capital?
Well, again, as far as the facilities go, if they have improvements or request improvements, they're not going to be falling on the DPW and their facility improvement lines. As far as vans and equipment, they either A, don't need any new vans and or equipment, or they have existing capital monies that they can spend for those vans and equipment, and they don't need to borrow anything in the future. So again,
does that answer your concern about suspect? Or is that finite enough? You said suspect. There's a very concrete answer. I really must tell you that to use pejorative language like that, he's a professional. He doesn't need
I'm not
suspect. I mean, and the question is a legitimate question. He has a legitimate answer. But reframe it, the idea of framing it as suspect,
I'll explain what I suspect.
Is that a positive way to do this?
Okay, I think suspect.
That was a very good answer.
There's a lot of lines that are disappearing in this year's budget.
I asked about it, but you know, suspect.
And yes, it is suspect because we average on capital, taking out resource recovery, about 15, 16 million a year. It jumped up a lot in 2008, 2009. By 2012, you're going to be doing, where the plans is to do less capital improvements compared to prior administration, which we accuse of not doing capital improvement. But the following year, it triples. And I'm worried about that. And I don't even see half the lines we're supposed to even have in this for next year and a year's future to even know what those projections are. So besides it tripling, we're going typically 14 to 17 million. I'm seeing 44 million, and I see so many lines missing. For example, what used to be a line of, say, recreation. There was dock and marine equipment. Every year we're spending between $100,000 and $150,000. All of a sudden, there's no line. We don't need any this next year, the year after, the year after. Again, yes, I'm suspect.
Well, sometimes
millions, add all these things up, millions of dollars, which are not in the capital budget, and I just don't feel comfortable with it, and that's why I want to discuss. So maybe I'm jumping to the next one. Under recreation, there was a line for docks and marinas, and like that's just sort of like gone from equipment. And maybe that's also maybe asking
Steve,
Greg.
Perhaps some of your questions can be answered if the board agrees to pass your next resolution, and then we can sit down with...
We won't be able to do it until next year's budget, the problem is. So it's really being discussed now, or we're going to have a budget here 2 days after the election. It's like no discussion. Try and give some time, if there are some things that need to be straightened out, maybe. Again, as controller, he doesn't know, he's not always looking. Does they still need equipment for marina? And he's going to probably re-ask now, you know, a couple of weeks to see if that's something we need to add in or take out from somewhere else. Well, again, that line should just disappear.
Right, well, again, that's a request that comes from the department. And in the particular case of the dock and marina equipment, Commissioner Dawson took a look at what his needs were, what he has. He may either A, have existing monies to purchase what he additionally needs, or may not need any equipment for the foreseeable future, so did not put in a request for that. Again, it's a budget. Something may happen to one of the pieces of equipment this year, and next year maybe you see something in there for marina and dock equipment. Again, that's why these things are done on an annual basis. Just going back to your point as to a $15 million budget this year, but next year it almost triples. The State Control's Office doesn't require, but they encourage a multi-year capital plan, and we choose to do a 3-year capital plan, I believe. So the out years are what the departments would love to get. And as I don't have the number, but it's probably in the $35 to $40 million range if every department got everything they needed to do all the work they had to do. Obviously, if we floated $40 million worth of bonds, that's going to have a tremendous impact on the tax rate. So what we do is we look at, okay, what can we reasonably get to? What do we have to prioritize as far as the projects go? And then, again, during the budget meetings, I sit with the commissioners and they agree, okay, we can take, road paving, we'll go down to $5 million or $6 million, whatever the case may be. Instead of $8 million worth of docks in 1 year, we'll do $2 million. Things like that.
Understanding that, but I know, for example, we have something else we're voting on for stay on recreation. East Islip Marina, we have to do some bulkheading work for the storm. I know we just went out to the bid for the last phase of bulkheading at the base marina. It came in $3.7 million. The last, actually 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, we had exactly $200 million. $2 million was going to just bulkheading, and we have a lot of big bill ones which we can't even handle right now. For some reason, in 2012, it goes down 400,000. But all the years after that, it goes back to the 200,000 that we set as the plateau over the last 5 years. So that's part of my concern. Then you point out, yes, you have a wish list in the future. There always has been a wish list. But you look at the 7-year history, usually the wish list, in 2007, you go on the range of the future, was like $1 million less, actually, or $3 million up, depending, future thing maybe was resource recovery, how to have a big project, or environmental control for a capital. But it was only like single-digit jumps. 2000, but it's just more recent years, again, almost everything was a single-digit ups and downs and projected over 3 years. The 2012 budget, going down for the capital, but the following years, it's in between $22 to $30 million jumps as a wish. We never had anything, we never really had about $10 million ever for the wish of the jump. And that's why I'm just a little concerned, again. See lines missing, that we may have had in the past. Again, we have a lot of marina, I don't see much no equipment for 4 years. And I could go on and on. And it's just, I just have a concern on the budget, how it's done right now, 1. And 2, if anything, is 1, emphasizing what we have to have an open process for the rest of the board when we vote on number 8. Again, my final statement for the code is just really basically, I'm concerned about we're just kicking down a problem, kicking the can down the road. A year from now, what are we going to have to deal with? And again, when we're over-exaggerating potential revenues, what's an economy that has shown to come down a lot, it's dramatically changed. Again, we projected we're going to get 30% more in compared to a year ago. I'm concerned about that. And are we going to have a large tax increase a year from now? And or we're going to have to stop just a lot of services. And that's what's scaring me. I do not like how this whole process of the budget was for the 4th year in a row asking for an open process. Thank you.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Motion